All right, we're going to be starting in about a minute. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. Shout outs to, wow, some people from my past are sitting here. Amazing. Wow. Nice to see everyone. Yeah, wow. Wow. Nice to see everyone here. We're going to start in a minute. And Lauren, thank you for helping organize this. If you have questions, I actually gone through, we have 63 people who registered from all over the world, and I've taken the time to go through a bunch of the questions. And so I'm going to this is interactive. It's event driven in the sense that you can feel free to interrupt as I'm talking, feel free to drop questions in. I will do my best to address everything that comes through, but I did look at about 57 different questions before going live today. So I'm going to do what I can to address this, but feel free to jump in. You know what? I'm just going to kick this off. More people will be joining us. I thank you all for being here. If you could put into the chat just where you're from so others know you, but I see many familiar faces from Nicholas and Michael and Troy and Glenn. Of course, Glenn. Hi, Glenn. How are you? And it's just great to be here. So the theme today is about the network strikes back as sort of a play on, of course, the Empire Strikes Back. And those of you who know me from the 30 years of Vaughn, there was a long time, and I didn't realize this in the early days, but, for the longest time, I thought that, I don't know, it was okay to be what I'll call a broadband parasite in the most polite way possible. The idea that, carriers had infrastructure and we had applications and we can do great things with those applications. And it was only in the last 6 months that I started to rethink my position on this because of something that we are all going to, any of you still involved in the telecom space, and those of you who are involved in the voice space, you may be noticing a resurgence, a renaissance, if you will. We sort of went from the dark ages. Now we're going to the renaissance. And I believe the renaissance of voice is something which is we're all going to benefit from. And I can tie all this back really to the commercial release of ChatGPT in November 22. And it turns out that, with infrastructure comes great power with great responsibilities. But one of the things that's happening is voice AI, which is, and you can call it AI voice. And there, for those, I don't know, I keep on wavering, but I'm going to talk about voice AI as opposed to AI voice, which seems to be a catch-all for everything. But looking at the evolution of what's happening, and those of you today that are building agentic AI agents, those of you that are deploying them, those of you who are managing them, they're the biggest issues that I've run into from startups I've been talking to is that on paper the technology works great, but what happens in real life is that when they deploy this, there's a latency issue in terms of performance because when you're speaking with AI, and if you've ever called into a doctor's office or to a restaurant or a car dealership, or you're talking to someone where there's definitely an AI agent you're talking to, there's the delay between when you speak and when you hear something. And the bigger question is, of course, is what was said, what was remembered, what was heard by the AI, and what was heard by you, and then how do you manage to talk over in a way because it's normal for us to interrupt each other. I do it with my sister all the time. Hi, Lauren. And but when we have AI, there's this need for the AI to understand where the conversation got interrupted. But the technology never really captures what our brains remember, right? We have the issue of what's heard by the agentic AI, but we don't necessarily share any APIs or any ways for us to know for the agents we're talking to what part we actually heard, what was really cut off, and where all that goes to. And this goes back to the overall theme that the network strikes back in the sense that if you happen to own the infrastructure, after 20 plus years of being in a business, a voice, which has gone not only least cost routing, but truly to a race to zero for making revenue, the rise of voice being cool again is now going to open up an opportunity to have two types of voice services, I believe, offered at least, if not this year, the next year. I'll call standard voice and premium voice. And this is both on a retail level and on a wholesale level. I believe what we're going to start to see is that, with the mobile operators who offer bundles of voice with data, that will continue. But what the AI agents need, the AI software companies need, or the enterprises deploying this need, is the highest quality voice, lowest latency, and the most secure paths available between their applications and the people. And that's where this all starts to differentiate. And so if you happen to be in the infrastructure side, it's taken 20 plus years. But I'm seeing real big signs that we're going to see new revenue opportunities kicking in for premium voice. And that's could be HD voice, it could be super wideband, it could even be, regular voice with lower latency, but the infrastructure and the AI, what the AI really needs is the best setup possible. So it wants low latency at all costs. And whether you're talking about doing things domestically in your country, but when you go international, that's when you start to see real things. And if you're deploying AI and you're doing termination in a foreign country and you're going through least cost routing, you're going to have really bad results because the transcoding of the codecs make it just difficult to be heard and to be understood. So the network strikes back is just an observation that I've gotten the last 10 weeks, particularly focused speaking to international operators who got on the HD voice bandwagon back in 2009 to 2016. Many gave up on it because consumers or their business customers were not ready to pay for HD or pay for higher quality. But I believe the voice AI revolution is going to drive that revenue now for the very first time. And so returns will happen. And so that was the premise for all this was why is it happening today? And it's happening today because we're starting to see the early results of deployments of agentic AI. And a lot of I don't know how many of you, I'm just curious I mean, I don't know how many of you are building agentic AI applications or thinking about it or seeing deployments of it. But as a consumer, I've had mixed results as a user, and things can only get better, I think, on that side of it. But I do believe that we're going to see a lot more voice traffic as a result of this. And I think that's important to note that voice traffic is going to go up and our tolerance for bad implementations, I think, will go down. So we have sort of a dichotomy here. And I see a lot of questions already. I just want to just go through my opening notes and I'll start looking at the questions. But I just want to just set that as a framework. The other thing which many of you wanted to know about, and I think we'll just do a separate session about, is VCons or virtualized conversations. Those of you who know me may know that I am and I can't have my shirt, but yes, I own the t-shirt for the VCon. That is to say that I'm the chair of the VCon Foundation and self-proclaimed CEO, which in my case stands for Chief Evangelist Officer. And it's been a fun journey in the last 3 years to talk to people about VCons. And it's very relevant for this conversation in the sense that what a VCon is, in its simplest form, is a suggested file format, a PDF for conversations, if you will. What's very significant about it is that sometime this year, more likely than not, it will become an official RFC, which from the Internet Engineering Task Force. And that implication means that if you're building or using VCons and you're connecting them to large language models, the large language models will intuitively understand what a VCon is. So instead of having to train your AI, your file format for your captured conversations, we now have a standard for the first time in the history of computing, the history of the internet, and that's pretty significant. It also means that it also I believe it elevates a conversation to be a true asset of a business. That the VCon gives the ability to have, well, not only to verify that a conversation took place, but you also have the guardrails built into the infrastructure, into the standard for compliance and consent with purpose and redaction, and the ability to manage consent. But it's only a protocol, it's only a file format. So it requires code to be written. It requires application developers to write the systems that follow the rules. Just because you have a standard, which means that if we all here together sit here and there's a transcript and we want to identify the parties to the conversation, we want to identify who said what, we might be able to do some of that. But the VCon itself, by itself, doesn't provide any ability to manage let's say you gave permission to be here and to record what you say, and I don't know, you just decided you want to be redacted. Well, the VCon format doesn't all of a sudden remove you from the record, but it requires the ability for the system that's doing the policy enforcement of the rules to do that. The good part is it's a starting point to work from. And so if you're interested in VCons, we're more than happy to talk to you about what it is. You can look at the on the IT working group website, you can look up VCon. At the next IETF meeting, some interesting conversations are continuing in that space. Not that long ago, I would tell you that a VCon the VCon was created after a conversation took place. But in the last year or so, that thinking has changed. Some people always wanted for it to be real time, and there's definitely people building applications with SIPREC to enable that to be real time. So that the VCon itself is part of it. And if Thomas was here, he would tell you that think of a VCon as a robot food for AI. And think about, and I always would say that the output is the brain food for you. And that when we have the ability to chain together conversations. So if you have a conversation with someone on email and someone on text and someone from a board meeting that was recorded and we have some video transcripts and some audio transcripts, we have the ability to bring all those things together. And there's, the beautiful thing about a VCon, I believe, over time, is that the mass market may never know that it exists, but it will be the users who use the applications that are created because of the VCon that makes it matter. So, there's some protocols we all understand. I still don't understand to this very day why wireless carriers promote 5G. Like, can anyone actually cite what 5G means versus 4G versus even 3G or 2G? I don't think so. But it happened, right? And I think it's nice in an industry to know that protocols exist because gives us something to talk about from an engineering perspective. But at the end of the day, it's going to be the applications we're now able to do that were never before practical or possible that will allow certain technologies to flourish and others may not. And it's, there's a lot of different applications. And for VCon specifically, I'm seeing people today doing proof of concept work in healthcare and in finance in areas which are heavily regulated and scrutinized in the US for compliance. I've seen very interesting applications come through. Well, I'm going to go to the questions because there's too many questions and not enough time. And
Just one question. First off, just because I tried to answer, are we sending a recording of today?
yes, I'm going to
Okay.
send a recording to everyone who's here. We'll get a recording, and
Okay.
everyone who's here also has. I'm going to encourage you to email Jeff@pulver.com questions that were not answered during this event because of my inability as a human being to scale to deal with everybody who's here. So I would, and I have enough time this summer. I'm happy to do, chats with each and every one of you if you'd like to talk, because this is both a one-to-one and one-to-many situation. But in terms of questions, let me just look at a few just to see if the first question that's coming in. Let me just look real fast. Just peeking. Lauren, maybe I shouldn't have said no to your help.
A lot of what you're just getting at the beginning is where we all are.
Okay.
I think the first question that I saw is from Gary Rubenstein, and I'm just,
All right.
mm,
Who are the leading companies to leverage voice
yes,
AI?
that's where there's a couple of anything after that might be a question.
Right. Okay. So I'll
And
start
Alon
with.
Cohen has his hand up.
Okay, I'll defer to Alone. Actually, Alone, and please, actually, let's unmute Alone so we can. I'll ask. You can unmute. Alone, go ahead. Just unmute and ask.
Yeah, so the just a comment on your latency issue is that every most of the implementations that I'm seeing today have to traverse three companies. The transcription, then the AI, and then the text to speech. So that obviously creates the latency and the limited ability to do the intervention during the speech. Some of the AI companies have already voice interfaces, but they don't have enough access for the logic to be injected from the AI voice AI vendors. So that creates that latency problem.
Right, and so in one case or two cases, I'm seeing the voice AI companies literally go to the co-location where the telecom company is and co-locate their GPUs there so that they have as close to the edge as possible connectivity to help reduce that. It will not eliminate that, and we also will have a speed of light issue, which I don't think we'll solve in terms of the lowest latency for global stuff. But yes, if we're gonna, that some of that latency alone is not going to go away, at least in this generation of AI. And also we have to deal with how some of this gets implemented because there's going to be other edge issues which we can't control. I mean, but thank you for raising that point. And low latency, yeah. So I would just as far as for those of you who don't know about low latency, the idea is that it takes time for computers to process things, and if depending upon where you are in the world, it takes time for signals to come across, and even in the best of times with high-speed broadband, there's going to be packet loss, but in order for the AI to work best is we need the least amount of time in milliseconds or faster to respond. And then it's always the whole walkie-talkie issue of talking to people, let alone talking to AI and understanding that. And then with that, there's also for 20 plus, really ever since Vines, I'll call it 28 years, we're been responsible for bringing down the quality of voice because in the race to zero of profitability or the very super thin margins we had, least cost routing came into the telecom world. And what we saw was people changing the codec, even if you started out with a high quality codec or voice compression, decompression technology, we end up squeezing into very small pipes and that lowers the ability. That's why if for those of you out of a certain age, you may have, remember growing up calling places and, with music on hold, but you never could hear the music. You can never hear the fidelity of young kids' voices because the ability for the call was constrained in the frequency range that it could capture and share. And the positive news is that we're now living in an era where commercially it's viable to have the higher fidelity signals available, not only for the AI, but also for you, so that your own conversations with friends and relatives, you can actually hear young voices on your phone if you were to talk to someone. And I do think we are going to see that. And as far as, from a business app perspective, going to go to Gary for a second. Actually, I'm going to put Gary on the spot if I can. Gary, could we unmute Gary and ask him to just so that I don't have to chain stuff together, Law?
Hey, Jeff, good to see you. Actually, I have a better second question than I had the first question, so I'll
Okay.
give you that one. Do you think there'll be future global regulatory rules that'll tell consumers they're speaking with a voice AI agent as opposed to not? You know,
I think so, but we're going to go to the resident regulatory expert of the world in the room. I'm going to pass this over to Glenn and ask him if he could comment off the record because I don't international stuff, I don't know, but domestic in the US, Glenn knows quite well.
Yeah, I think that there are a number of state laws, Gary, that already require notification if you're talking to an AI agent. We anticipate there'll be more. I think that that's probably a trend, particularly as AI agents become more prolific. I mean, it's interesting because, on the one hand, some of it has to do with commercial entities and marketing related. But a question is raised that if you use an AI agent, for example, to book your next vacation or to undertake tasks for you, make a dental appointment, go do this or that, raises an interesting question whether in that circumstance the business that you're contacting needs to know that you're being represented by an AI agent. I think the presumption is the focus is usually on the other transaction that you're reaching out to for customer service and that you're notified that you're speaking to an AI agent rather than a human.
yeah, no, I see it. The question was more from a consumer protection, but your point is actually maybe more valid. If I'm using an AI agent to do my business, the receiving party also may be in jeopardy.
I don't know if they may be in jeopardy, but the question
Well,
is whether it makes sense for them to be informed
correct,
that
correct.
you've been, and then they need to be informed that your AI agent has actually taken over for you and you no longer exist, and the AI agent is now in charge of everything and making all your vacation plans.
Correct.
Uh,
Very good.
Thank you, Glenn, and thank you, Gary. I see Ron's raised his hand. Ron, go ahead.
It's more of a follow-up question to what Gary and Glenn talked about. So I know that in a few states in the US, there is the two-party consent. You have to let all participants know if you're recording the call. How does it work in terms of AI agents? So there are states in which you have to inform people that you're talking with an AI agent, but there are states that you're not allowed, you don't have to inform them, but you do have to let all parties know if you're recording the call. And legally, if you want to run an AI at the end, you have to record the call, feed it to the AI, and then let the AI answer. So how does it work in those cases?
Glenn, I am so grateful you happen to be in the room today.
I'm not sure I am. It seems to me that those are separate questions. I think recording and consent, there's sort of a body of law and rules and regulations, both at the federal level and at the state level. It wasn't apparent to me that there's always when you're interacting with an AI agent, is it just assume that in all cases that conversation or text or whatever is going to be recorded? I mean, I don't know that for certain, but if there is a recording taking place, then I would assume not only would the AI disclosure rules be you'd have to comply with those, but you'd also then have to be concerned about the recording and the consent rules related to capturing and maintaining those recordings. So I think you'd probably have to probably manage both of those regulatory structures if there were both AI notification and recording obligation and recording consent obligations.
Thank you. Thank you, Glenn. So and that's important stuff because when we look at what's happening with voice AI and looking at what we're referring to as consent, there are I think I remember five cases that went to the Supreme Court about consent. And in the United States, there's a distinction between living in a one-party consent, being in a one-party consent state or a two-party consent state where you can record without telling someone or the other, or you need explicit permission of the other party. And the rules, of course, get complicated when you go outside the US into other jurisdictions. And if you were super conservative, I think the idea is that you have to assume you need both parties to consent. If you have two-party consent all the time, I believe you could stay out of the muddy waters. But say the George Jets, when we get to a futuristic state where it's my agent talking to your agent, I don't know how those rules are going to evolve yet. But I do think we are going to see in the next 18 months a killer app that's not driven by business, but driven by a consumer, but sold to consumers to help offload regular everyday tasks to, which will then perhaps have your permission to be you. I mean, I don't know how many of you in the US wait on hold to make a doctor's appointment where you have to state your name and your date of birth. And then you have to wait on hold for a human to actually just sync a calendar. Why can't we figure out how to give permission, all legal permission to an object to help us do that? Or you want to, I don't know, you looked at your bills and you decided that, you were billed the wrong amount. Why should you have to be talking to an AI by yourself? Why can't you have your AI do that? And historically, at least on the internet, it's a lot of the innovation we've seen has come through first on the consumer side, then went to business. If you look at the evolution of messaging on the internet, for example, that started out really as us consumers, and then people saw ways to bring that into business, and that's how it's grown. And I think, in voice AI, it's going to be the same thing. And it's just, we need the killer apps. And I just got a few direct messages about VCons in business, and it really is all about the business. And I'll just take a moment and explain a little bit of my background and belief in virtualized conversations. Is that I remember, I don't know how many of you ever used or were playing with Lotus Notes back in the 90s or Domino when IBM got it. But Lotus Notes to me and Ray Ozzie, I believe, absolutely got it right, attempting to capture, we'll call it the wisdom of the elders from a corporate perspective, being able to capture the information about a company, its rules, it's how it's run, customer data, sales data, engineering data, and making it freely available internally or set of rules of how to share that information. And a VCon gives you that ability to capture knowledge and make it and give you total recall. And I think that's both scary and exhilarating at the same time. That within your company, you could take your least performing asset, your email systems, and you could Viconify those. You could literally turn all those emails into an object which could be understood by any LLM, add more value by connecting conversational information about that. And that just changes how that truly will redefine unified communications in the sense that unified communication for many years has been how to unify communication into a company, but not necessarily unified communication inside a company and unify how that stuff, how the information flows. And we can move from being reactive to proactive in how we communicate with people. So I happen to be on the side of believing that having a standard for conversations will help change how we communicate on a corporate level, and that will go down. And that will filter down to on the personal side. And there's just a lot that becomes possible as a result of VCons becoming pervasive. And for those of you interested in the ongoing work of VCons, there's a working group at the IETF. The next IETF meeting is about a little less than a month away, and you're certainly invited to join online. You can attend the meeting online and go in person. And there's a VCon working group. And if you just Google or ask your favorite LLM about it, there are links to the VCon working group. And it's a fairly active and at moments group of people who are communicating about that. And there's one very popular GitHub site for VCons is conserver.io, conserver.io. And you could see many forks of that. And that the conserver is what helps create a VCon. And then there are connectors to that vCon to the conserver. If you use SCIT, which is supply chain integrity, transparency, and trust, which is one protocol for managing consent, and also there's a connector for JLink for that also offers the ability to manage consent. And so you can, if you're interested in the technical side, a lot of it is there in open source, and it just requires playing around. And in terms of, at least for discovery, and one thing which I'm excited about is back in April, I relaunched with the help of some friends Free Roll Dial-Up. It's fwdialup.com. And if you were to get an account on FWD, you'll find that every one of your conversations in FWD is stored as a VCon. And if you're a developer, we offer you a webhook to take those conversations and start to explore what you can do with a VCon. So it's all there for development purposes. And it's fwdialup.com. And there's some people who are building applications, even integrating agentic AI applications into FWD to demonstrate state of the art. And so we're just in the early game for learning and just starting to understand how we really can deploy this. Lauren, are there more questions in the chat?
There was a question from, let's see, I got to go back a little bit. Do you think the future is mostly about increasing bandwidth to support AI or about training AI to work with lower quality formats, especially in countries with less ideal infrastructure? And that's from Ron.
I think it's a multifaceted answer. I mean, ultimately, I think it's going to be the hardware that we deploy on the edge that's going to solve most of this. We have a transitional issue. Now, I'm not suggesting that we spend $100,000 at every edge point right now, but we can technically solve this. And I'm aware of enterprises today that are using VCons where literally are minting a million VCons an hour. And they're at scale and it's working okay. So it's working internally, but when we go over the internet, that's when we start to have the transitional issue. So that if you're doing a deployment internally to someone's call center where everything is on premise, it works quite well right now. They do have big GPUs on site and it does work well. When we're talking about having it, a geographic issue, it's going to take a little bit of time. And so that the answer varies depending upon how much someone could invest in solving that problem and how much they want to. But on the positive side, the cost to use large language models are going down, the price for tokens are going down, and the ability to transcribe if you're not doing local transcription, if you're doing it outsourced, a lot of innovation in the past year in the models being used to do transcription, so and accuracy. And there is also, so many companies coming into the market that many of these companies it's become commoditized even before people have come to market. And so there's a lot of repositioning of what a company is trying to do. And it's very frothy. No one's going to say no to what's happening right now. But I think this market segment is going to grow, but there are other things that are dependent, right? Your access to channels to sell, your ability to create awareness for what you're doing, the ability to find strategic business partners to work with, and understand no one is an island, and that we need to find ways to connect and to build community and to work together and to cross connect relationships. And one of the things I enjoy about the VCon Foundation is that we're fundamentally bringing together people. Some of them may be competitors, but right now we're at a stage of a need to have, I call it cooperation and really co-opetition. We're at a stage right now where we need to build implementations and do interoperability testing and do market education together. Because no, I don't think any one company, any one person is going to be able to take what a VCon is and explain it to the world, but together we can have global impact. And so that's why in July, I'm going to be hosting I've been very grateful to people who've been coming out to the VCon Foundation meetings. Well, I'm now calling them road trips or meetups, and I've done them in a bunch of cities. We're going to be in Chicago, I believe, on August 10th. But next month, we're going to do a virtual meetup as if it's the same content at one of our meeting locations, except we're just going to do it online. That way we can have some of the people from the UK and from Colombia and from Norway that have joined the VCon Foundation. They can participate. So we're going to do a global roadshow, but virtual, and work toward getting the word out. Because one of the things we need as the from the emerging voice AI space is to provide not only leadership but training and building awareness, and to figure out how do we cross connect and how do we best amplify and how do we demonstrate how this works, and try to find folks from multiple generations to come in and to share their knowledge, and just be have a chance to be as creative as possible in the implementations. I'm just looking at some of the other questions that came in earlier. I might add that for VCons themselves, there are some nice public safety applications in place. A friend of mine, Jill from Frontline Group, she had a proof of concept supported by United Way in Kansas City, and they were using VCons for a 211 service in Kansas City, and the project completed successfully, and it brought to life a lot of conversations that otherwise would have been heard or taken care of. And about a year and a half ago, I was approached by the New Zealand Police Department. They were because in New Zealand they only have a couple of public safety access points, and they were looking at using VCons to triage non-emergency 911 calls. And while the project never took off, the interest, it just kindled my interest in looking for ways to use VCons for good. And I believe that and then at the ITF there's actually 911 there are a few people from the 911 side of things that are part of the VCon working group too, because it can be used to help triage in emergency situations. And so there's almost every vertical that you could think of, there are applications where VCons can be used in theory and some now in practice. And the big takeaway for me is that conversations are the interface, and then we learning how to take turns in talking, the latency, the context and the content, all that matters. And they become the assets that we're providing value for. And in this voice AI world where we have the LLMs and we have the ability to do these things, all of a sudden companies can now extract value from conversations, and we can have memory and trust working together. And when we build an infrastructure that has the highest quality signals there with the lowest latency, there's a higher probability that that stuff will just work. And it's just, but we need to build trust. Unfortunately, VoIP did great things for this world, but it also kind of, I don't know if we kind of provided for the taking. Part of the robocalling problem we have is due to VoIP too. We kind of have to own up responsibility because you can spoof phone numbers very, very easily, and bad actors have done that. Now, I won't say that, if it wasn't available, people would find other ways to be bad actors, but we need to really build up our trust again. We need to find ways to bring trust back to communications, and we have a long way to go for that. Lauren, any additional questions before we?
Let's see. There's quick question about hold on one second. Whether VCANs will the target for the hackers and data breachers and
Well, I'll just stop there for a second. So, of course, yes. I mean, why not, right? One of the fallacies with open protocols is the ability to be totally transparent. And so, if Glenn and I have a VCon managing every time we speak or text, I trust that the conserver is managing that. But there's no way to stop that VCon from forking and being copied or even faked. In fact, for developers, there are tools to help create fake VCons to help test your system. So, will people get in there and do fraudulent bad things? I think so. I don't encourage it, but I think that we need to have safety rails. But it's for every good open. I mean, the reason why we have so many cyber attacks in the world is because the internet was built on trust. And that if you look at almost every protocol that's out there, it's trust first. So if you want to look at the vulnerabilities of the protocols, you will find them. And people who want to do bad things will do bad things. That is the truth. So as a patchwork to stop that, the protocols have been adjusted and fixed to make it not so obvious ways to have holes. And you will find VCons can be certified. On the positive side of the VCons, they were created to be signed with immutable trust, right? But if again, it's like being on a blockchain. If someone wants to do really bad stuff, they'll do it. It's I cannot accept that. I won't say it won't happen, but I have not seen that happen yet. But the data breaches, yeah, it probably happens too. I don't, we're going to see. I think for the rest of our existence on this planet, there will be data breaches. If you want to participate in the VCon RFCs and make it spread, by all means, we'll take a look at conserver.io as a start and look at some of the forks. Join the VCon working group from the IETF. If you'd like, you could certainly join the VCon Foundation and help us figure out how to spread the word too. John, if you're up for it, I'd like to give John Yoakum the microphone to rather than me have to read if John's there. Lauren.
Well, we'll see if John's here.
There you are. How are you, sir?
Pretty good. So one of the things that always has gotten convoluted with voices, there's really two voices. There's mobile voice and there's what we used to all know as voice. And there are so many different things that still cause mobile voice conversations to be hard to understand. Some of them are in the technology and some of them are in the bandwidth and some of them are the ability because you're moving and some of them are just where you happen to be talking from since the phone's in the palm of your hand. So I was just curious, since you started this conversation of talking about higher quality voice being sort of key to all of this, how do you think that's going to play out since almost everybody's on a mobile phone nowadays? You can certainly build applications where when you have good network connectivity, you can have really superior voice. But in the everyday usage, that just isn't true.
Well, I hear you, but at least we could flag it so that if the network's noticing that the connectivity isn't good, we could at least put alerts or somehow signal to the AI that things are not working. So rather than be blind about it. I mean, the nice part about some of the advocacy that myself and a few others did started in 2008-ish, 9, is that inside the mobile phones there is wideband AMR as a codec, and it's sitting in the iPhones, it's sitting on the Android phones today. So at least from you to the cell tower, if there is adequate bandwidth, that part is covered. But sort of like the issues we had in the early days of Vonage. I mean, when you're dependent upon Wi-Fi working well in someone's residence for the phone to work, and you know for a fact that they're overloaded because the kids are gaming or the quality of their signal in the home is bad, Vonage didn't do too well by telling their customers, gee, you don't have good connectivity because they said, no, you suck. And, they were right. I mean, because we came across being bad because their perceived experience from how we deployed the connectivity, the customers are right. But I couldn't argue with the engineers who said that the reason why the connectivity was bad was because they didn't have enough bandwidth in their home for the voice to work. And so that was always a dilemma. And that never, I think, will be solved necessarily so obviously.
Well,
Um,
one of the big problems with mobile phones is it's like the old cable modem problem. The downlink bandwidth is great, the uplink is poor. And so when you're having trouble talking to your wife from Costco, it's not usually because, necessarily there isn't some bandwidth there. It's that the uplink isn't good enough. The transmitter in your phone isn't powerful enough to get to the tower that it needs to get to. You stepped behind some metal rack of stuff in Costco, and all of a sudden the signal can't get through, or there's a bunch of screaming kids next to you. So there's all these stupid different factors.
oh
And that's
yeah.
what I'm struggling with is some of those aren't solvable.
Then there probably it's probably not solvable. And then of course we also have the insertion of the quiet, right? There's modifications to the signal to get rid of noise. And maybe some of that noise is not noise that should be taken out.
That's
That
right.
matters. And of course, as you said, if since poor quality leads to misunderstandings talking to a person, you can imagine the AI trying to do the same, trying to understand context, but if it can't get to the content, how can it do that? And so there's a lot of confirmational information that needs to be we need context to the content, whether we're talking human to human or human to AI. And I do think the whole idea of AI to AI and what the rules are for that need to be thought out. I don't know. I'm going to ask Glenn. Glenn, do you think in the next 2 years, the FCC is going to think about AI to AI communications, or is that just for the next administration?
You asked me another question, I'm going to have to bill you, Jeff.
Oh boy. Okay.
Seems to me that the commission's already kind of looked at AI issues in the context of robocalling, and that, they've said that it's an automated call if it comes from AI. There's an executive order that the president issued, I don't know, sometime, months ago, that kind of wanted the FCC to take a more proactive look at AI in terms of attempting to preempt state regulation of AI, because obviously the states are moving forward with regulation of AI, and it sort of lagged at the federal level, and there have been calls for the FCC, FTC, other federal agencies to take the lead, or Congress to do something that would preempt conflicting state, AI regulations. So the other issue that's come up with AI, it's kind of an interesting one, which is we have this whole know your customer proceeding, which is focused on voice. And one of the proposals would require voice service providers, before they onboard a new customer, to collect a government issued ID from somebody trying to open up a new account. Well, what happens
Really?
if it's an AI agent trying to open an account? I don't think a driver's license or a birth certificate, or, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're more sophisticated than I give them credit for.
Huh.
But that issue has now been raised. Also, there's millions of people in the United States that don't have government issued IDs. That's a separate human issue, but clearly AI agents don't have it. So it is a bit of a mess. I mean, I think that given the fractured nature of Congress these days, it's probably going to be hard for Congress to lead on an AI bill. I know the administration really wants to preempt the states. Somebody's got to take the lead on that. And right now, it's just, to my knowledge, it hasn't happened.
Thank you, Glenn. All right, before I wrap up, I just want to, and by
Well,
the way, thank you for all for participating. We're hosting in October in Atlanta our fall Voice and Conversations on the Net conference. And this is sort of at the center of what the event's doing. And I was a music DJ as a teenager into my 20s, and I've been a conference DJ for the last 29, 30 years. And I love to mix and match the conversations and the flow. And so if any of you are interested in participating and sharing your opinion or have ideas for things you'd like to see at the conference, you're invited to join us. This is part of how I ended up with the Network Strikes Back, was talking to carriers, talking to voice AI companies and a number of startups and 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 seeing what they're seeing and listening. And so I'm always looking for opinions to be shared and ideas to be heard. And so if you'd like to participate, you're invited to do so. And same also, if you'd like to have a conversation with me after this, just ping Jeff@pulver.com and happy to speak a one-on-one. But I know Keith had a question in the comments, and Keith, give it to you, hand the microphone to you.
Sure, thanks. This is it's a quick one based on, what do we do out in the public end, and that's closer to where I'm operating. So let's take two good actors. One are banks and the other are medical facilities, both of which, because of the funding behind them, are quick to adopt and adapt to these things. And there was a conversation online on your LinkedIn earlier today that started with the sentence of I've written it down here. Right. So you talk to your AI agent and you go, I want to reschedule. Oh, cancel that. And which part did the AI agent run with?
Right.
Cancel the reschedule, cancel the appointment itself. The real-time output of that is a lot of complaints going on right now in both those industries. Medical appointments have been canceled, accounts changes because, and it was again what you would put in writing, what AI executed on is not what the human necessarily heard, maybe latency related, maybe not. But that pause that you talked about, turning content into context is an important part of it. But what do we do right now, I guess is the question. How do anybody who's building things, the doctor's office is signed up. Damn, I'm never going back to that eye doctor again, given my experience personally. And I'm just one of how many, right?
No, it's a true issue, and it's evolving. And so I give a lot of credit to the companies that are becoming customers of the new technology, but there is going to be fallback. But if you want to laugh a little bit, you can go on YouTube and take a look at what happened when IBM teamed up with McDonald's and had the prior generation of AI attempt to take meal requests. It's pretty humorous actually, but then again, I feel bad about those results, and I do think today we could do so much better with how in really a couple of years the entire technology has evolved tremendously. But it's I don't have any answers. I have frustration too. It's like dealing with it's like at one point either I wait on hold for a doctor for 23 minutes to talk to a doctor's office, or I'm navigating through not an IVR but an AI replacement, and it's frustrating, and it only lets you do so much, and then it just I've been hung up on more than anything else, maybe from some of my side comments. So I don't have an answer for that yet. I think we're still nascent, but on the other hand, the sector we're talking about probably will add $1 trillion of value into the new
Yes.
telecom industry. And the thing is that a lot of the companies into the market, not the OGs of voice AI or for the matter AI, but a lot of the new market entrants don't know much about telecom. And so they're they're coming in and they're starting to understand the places where there are holes in quality of service and the ability to do the connectivity. Some are blind to what the rules and regulations are. And it's a brand new opportunity for both learning and for sales and and to finally code stuff, which we couldn't do. And if you're looking for a summer project this summer, pick up vibe coding. I can't say the code you create is going to be the best, but friends of mine that never could write code before are very proud of writing code. It's sort of like if you go on Claude or I don't know Gemini or maybe ChatGPT and you start creating art. You think you're an artist, you know, we're an artist. My sister Lauren's going to argue you're not an artist, but if you get the prompts right, you can create some great looking pictures. So whether you're creating art or you're creating code, to me, if you're a software developer, you're an artist. That's been my position most of my life. I think there's a whole art of writing code, and it's a source of creativity. And what we were able to do a year ago compared to now is breathtakingly changed in a beautiful way. And I think the next 18 months ahead is just going to make it stronger and better. And it's not about how the AI failed yesterday, but it's what we can prepare for tomorrow. And again, if you have any friends that are in the network space that gave up on voice, the renaissance is here. And I think that we're going to see great things and great opportunities, which maybe was from a generation ago, but we're going to see great things once again. And I think voice is going to be sold at a premium. And if you want a proof point, just take a look at what some of the voice AI companies are charging right now per minute. It's not 3 cents. It's like 59 cents, 65 cents, $1, depending upon what the offerings are. And there's it's pretty amazing to me. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate your time. I hope you have a great summer. And if you'd like to join us, I'm planning a couple of Zoominars with Glenn during July. Thank you, Glenn, for that. And I will just say thanks for your time, Lauren. Thanks for organizing. Thanks all of you for sharing time. Some of you I haven't seen your faces in forever. It's nice to see you again. And I will be back again sometime soon. Hope take care all and thank you for being here. I'm very, very grateful for your time today. Thank you.